I still hadn't completely learned everything. And I move over here to Honolulu, and I'm like reinventing myself. It's like, okay, I made all this money once, I can do it again. You know, I have 4 business degrees and I graduate with honors, and I know all this stuff. Well, it wasn't working. I used to be able to make $50,000 a month easy. Now I can't even make my $1,500 a month rent payment. And I literally could not understand, like, what is going on here. And what I now know, but I didn't know then, is it was because I wasn't in flow. I wasn't aligned with my purpose. And I was again trying to live according to the rules of this world that we're in. Then 2015, October, my mother passed away. And my mother, because of all the mental illness and everything, I'd spent many, many times preparing for her death. But when it finally happened, it was pretty devastating. Well, because I was dealing with all these financial issues and all this other stuff, I was not sure about what to do, because first they were not going to have a memorial right then. They were going to wait, since my family members, we were all scattered, most of us around the country, and it was just the one sister and a brother in Salt Lake. So we were going to have a memorial later when we could all come. But it was decided at the last minute that no, they were going to do a memorial then. I didn't know what I was going to do. And this was about a day or so after my mom had passed. I was struggling financially. There's family issues that made me uncomfortable about going to her memorial. All of a sudden, it was about a day after she passed, she came to me and she said, "You don't need to go." And she showed me where to go meet her. And because she was into flowers and she taught me the love of flowers and plants, I learned all the edible plants in the deserts of Utah, and I became a landscape contractor. So she showed me this garden that she would be at, and she's sitting on a log and these tall, what look like pine trees. And she said, "Go there. That's where I will be. And that's where we can be together." Well, I had no idea where this place was. All I knew is, okay, that's where I will go. And that gave me it was okay that I didn't go to the memorial, because I knew where I'm supposed to go with her and where we can be together. What's weird is even though I was questioning the validity of what had happened with her telling me this, I still had this note. I began to develop this relationship with my mother on the other side that I never had when she was alive. And in fact, I kept asking her, "Why are you here?" And that was her answer: to be the mother that she couldn't be when she was alive. So after I wrote this letter where she had grabbed my arm, I still had these experiences or these situations where I would doubt. After this had happened, my rational mind would doubt. And I got up to make an espresso, and I went to the window and looking at this mountain, which this mountain is significant, but I'll explain later. But I went to make an espresso, and I'm looking at this mountain, and I look down at my arms, and the left arm, the hair is standing straight up, and the right arm is laying down. And to me, that was physical evidence for me to know that what had occurred is real, because I obviously encountered some sort of electrical energy force to make my hair stand up on one arm and not the other. So that was pretty huge for me to give me some validation that what I was experiencing was real. Around February of 2016, this sister that I'd been writing to, who lives in Salt Lake City, about this experience with my mom, came to visit. And we had planned all this stuff that we were going to do. And it was all stuff that we had never done before, places that I haven't been necessarily, and that she certainly hasn't been. And so as we started out this one day, we started in this valley here called Manoa Valley. And that was where we were under a tree, a big old banyan tree, and my sister's on the phone with her husband. And that's when I started experiencing these like vertigo kind of feelings and dizziness and all around like physical instability. And I remember asking my sisters, like, drive, I need to like get out of this location. And so as we're driving through this valley, I start feeling these feelings more and more of this, and it feels like vertigo to me. And so as we're driving through this valley, we go to this one area and we start heading up this mountain, which is the mountain that I would look out at from my condo and where I was making coffee after that experience. So we're heading up this mountain. It's only like 4,000 feet, maybe. I'm used to living in Salt Lake City and in Big Bear Lake, which is 9,500 feet. So I don't get altitude sickness. And yeah, this day driving up this mountain, I had what felt like the most severe altitude sickness and vertigo. And the more we climbed up the hill, and I kept saying to my sister, like, what is going on with me? This is just so bizarre. Like, the altitudes don't bother me normally. And so as we get to the top of this mountain, we get to this park that we had decided we were going to go see. I had never been there, and we were going to go for a walk. So we get to this park, I get out of the car, and I'm now so delirious. I basically tripped, hit the ground, and got up and went and we sat on a picnic table trying to compose myself, had some water, and waited for a little while. And then we started to go for a walk. And as we're going on this walk, she's ahead of me and she's on the right-hand side, and I'm on the left-hand side. And all of a sudden I look over to the left, and there's this log, and there's my mom sitting on the log with these tall trees that she had shown me a year ago where she said she would be. It was the most amazing experience I've ever experienced in my life, to actually physically see my mother. It wasn't solid, but it was pretty close to solid. And there she was, showing me the garden. I'm in the garden that she had said that she would be. And I immediately, burst into tears, tapped my sister on the back, and I said, she's here. And she said, what do you mean she's here? And I said, Mom, she is here. And of course she couldn't see her. And, but she knew, because of me explaining these experiences before, she knew that I was having this experience because I'd already told her about some of this stuff. So again, my mother is stronger. I'm having this deeper relationship with her. And I continually asking, why are you here? And her only answer was to be the mother she couldn't be when she was alive. And she started teaching me all kinds of things, but again, I still didn't know why she was here. Well, in October 2017, I started to get sick. And as I kind of mentioned earlier, I, from an early age, had lung issues, asthma, bronchitis. The first time I was in the ICU in my first near-death experience, it was because I had pneumonia. And I would get pneumonia and bronchitis several times a year growing up. Several years I couldn't even go to school. I had to do homeschool because it was so bad. And I had started in Santa Barbara doing herbs rather than Western medicine. And so I started getting sick. I thought it was my normal bronchitis and pneumonia. Started using my herbs and they weren't working. And so within a month, we're now in November. I grew up in an addictive family. I also had addictions that I had learned what I now know were ways for me to self anesthetize myself so that I didn't have to feel feelings. And that was something that seemed to be most people in my family had experienced. By January of 2018, my oxygen levels were around 40–50%. Most people are dead by then. I couldn't walk. I was completely a mess. And I finally called a doctor to come and pick me up. And luckily they had a place here that they would pick you up. And they took me to the doctor's office and they could tell that I was dying. Immediately called an ambulance, which then took me to the hospital, and I went to the ER. They could not figure out what was wrong with me. I mean, they knew that I had some sort of pneumonias and so forth, but they still couldn't figure out what was going on. And my whole body was shutting down to die. So they finally realized they couldn't figure out what was wrong. They admitted me to the hospital. And I wasn't yet in the ICU. I was in like a holding room when they, admit you to the hospital. And that was when I felt that I was leaving my body. So my first experience was this nurse that was in there taking care of me and trying to clean me up because I was a mess. I hadn't showered for at least a couple of weeks. And so she's cleaning me up, and all of a sudden I'm in this hospital room, but all of a sudden she starts looking like a nun from about 400 or 500 years ago. And I'm looking out and I see this beautiful countryside, not downtown Honolulu where I was at. And I did not understand what was happening to me, but I knew that it felt like I was going back in time and then back to the present time and back in time. And so this lady said to me, she thanked me. She said, "I want to thank you for helping me fulfill my purpose, which is to help people transition to the other side." I was in absolute shock because number one, I didn't believe I was dying. And number two, why are you thanking me? Like, I should be thanking you for what you're doing for me. Like I said, I would go in and out, and I was, on one hand, I'm here in this hospital room, and then I'm all of a sudden in this this old like cathedral basilica kind of place, and she is there as a nun. I did not know who this lady was at this time. I was, and I'll just share now, after my NDE, I was doing spiritual book studies, and one of the things I was doing was studying the Bible again, because I wanted to understand some of the more metaphysical reasons of the Bible. And as I was doing that, somehow we came across this discussion of saints, Catholic saints. And I grew up Mormon. I knew nothing about Catholic saints or the Catholic Church. What was so amazing is I didn't really research who she was or anything. But back in March, which was one of the first times that I shared my story publicly, I decided to go and look a little bit more about St. Teresa of Avila. Well, when I was researching her, and I saw that they call it the Basilica de Torres, which is where she lived and where she died. I looked at the photo, and literally this basilica, the view from it is the exact countryside that I had seen in the hospital before I was completely crossed over. And I still don't know all the details, but I know that I was going back in time with her, and that I have been with her in the past, but I was also there with her in the present, and she was helping me cross over. After I was with this woman that I later learned was Saint Teresa of Avila, feeling the love and the compassion from this woman. And the fact that she was actually thanking me for helping her fulfill her purpose was huge. And it's something that I will never, ever forget. And I also think it's amazing that I grew up Mormon and knew nothing about, Catholic saints, let alone her. And to know that I now have this connection with her is amazing. And I'm looking forward to knowing more about this connection that I have with her. So I was now going in and out of my body and in and out of consciousness. And I was then taken to the ICU. And they didn't know what to do because I was crashing, my whole body was shutting down, and I was dying. But they couldn't figure out why. And it seemed like they didn't know what to do. And there was two options. The head of the lung clinic came to talk with me, and there was literally two options: put you on the ventilator and see what happens, or do a tracheotomy. And to see the head of the lung clinic that does this all the time, and to see the fear, maybe my fear that he was reflecting back to me, but I could read his whole face, and his whole face was saying, "You're dying, and there's nothing that I can do to help you." The next thing I knew, my sister, who lived in Salt Lake City, was on the way to Hawaii, but I didn't want them to intubate me until she was here. The next thing I remember, she showed up and they started to intubate me. And I spent the next week or two on the ventilator, strapped to a bed in the ICU with no means to communicate. And that's when I was constantly in and out of my body. And my mom was there. Before I knew it, there was no tunnel anymore, and I would go directly to the light. Whereas I'd had this tunnel before in my near-death experience in 2004 that brought me, made me stay in Hawaii. But now I would go to the light wheel. All of a sudden, I am at the light with my mother and God, and I'm separate from them, but also one with them. And looking down at my body, and everybody that's had an animal and seen the animal has hurt itself, and sometimes you have to put that collar on the animal because it keeps licking the wounds or whatever. That's the way I was looking at myself. And I remember looking at myself thinking, "Oh, you poor thing. What have you believed about yourself and the world?" And it was at that time that I realized that every belief that I had about myself and the world was wrong. All of those thoughts of unworthiness and not good enough, just the way I am, I realized they were false, and none of it was true. For the first time in my life, I got to experience what is complete, unconditional, in the truest sense, because in this realm, we don't even understand what true, unconditional, absolute love, agape, is. I certainly had never experienced it until I was outside of my body. And I never, ever had compassion for myself until I was outside of my body. And I viewed myself for the first time the way that God does. And this unconditional love and compassion that God has for all of us. This non-judgmental God. And I also got to see that all of these things that I had spent all my life trying to attain, and to be validated, to be good enough, none of them meant anything. And the eyes of God, none of it. It's who did you love? Who loved you? Whose life did you make better? That was the stuff that I saw that was important. So for the next several weeks, I would leave my body, in and out of my body, into the light, out of the light, back and forth. I started hearing all of a sudden a song in the ICU playing, and it's by Daniel Goki, and the song is "Tell Your Heart to Beat Again." And this song was playing, and it was so faint, but I knew that it was for me, the message. And it was talking about yesterday is a closing door. You don't live there anymore. Let faith wash over you. And basically what this song, as it was playing and what I was experiencing, is that all of this stuff that had happened to me in the past, none of it mattered. And I was truly given this chance to be renewed. But it was up to me to take it.